In a world where exceptional strength and extraordinary talents were the norm, there existed a family whose dominance was unparalleled, the Runcandel family. Renowned for their unparalleled swordsmanship, the Runcandels were born with formidable physiques and extraordinary abilities that set them apart from all others. Their overwhelming combat prowess allowed them to conquer vast territories, extending their influence over nearly half the world. With their unmatched skill and control, the Runcandel family stood as the epitome of martial supremacy, shaping the course of history with their might. Jin Runcandel was born into the Runcandel family, a powerful and famous family known for their incredible swordsmanship and strength. As the youngest son, everyone had high hopes for him. During the family's special ceremony, where they predict a child's future, Jin made a bold choice. He selected the sword of the family head. This sword was not only a symbol of leadership but also a sign of the family's strength. Even as a baby, Jin seemed to believe he was destined to become the next family leader. The sword, once wielded by the founder of the Runcandel family, seemed to recognize Jin's potential. It was almost as if it was saying that Jin was special and destined for greatness. The family, too, had high expectations, convinced that Jin's future was filled with success and glory. However, as Jin grew up and began his training, things didn't turn out as everyone had hoped. Despite his determination and hard work, he struggled with swordsmanship. No matter how much he practiced, his skills never seemed to improve. While other members of the Runcandel family, with their natural talent and strength, excelled, Jin's performance was far from impressive. Years passed, and Jin's lack of progress became more apparent. The family members, who had once viewed him with hope, now saw him as a disappointment. He was mocked and ridiculed, earning the harsh title of the worst dunce of the Runcandels. To many in the family, he was a symbol of failure, someone who didn't live up to the high standards set by his ancestors. Jin's struggles were not just a matter of personal failure but also a heavy burden on his shoulders. The expectations that had once seemed like a promise of greatness now felt like an unshakable weight. He was constantly reminded of his inadequacies, and the future that once seemed bright now seemed out of reach. Jin was deep into his training routine when his brothers, Haydena and Daytona, interrupted him. Their laughter filled the air as they approached, mocking Jin for swinging his wooden sword. Daytona sneered, nudging Haydena and pointing out how Jin's obsession with the wooden sword was due to his refusal to use anything else. Jin had chosen this particular sword when he was a baby, and it was the only one he would ever use. Haydena approached Jin with an air of superiority, asking Jin where Jin's special sword, Barasada, was. Jin's face tightened with annoyance as he sensed the mocking undertone in his brothers' voices. Their taunts grated on him, but he remained silent, unwilling to give in. When Jin remained silent, Haydena's patience snapped. Without warning, he drove his foot into Jin's stomach with brutal force. Jin crumpled to the ground, a gasp of agony escaping his lips. He clutched his midsection, struggling for breath as waves of pain surged through him. At that moment, Jin was reaching for his wooden sword when Daytona deliberately stepped on Jin's hand, pinning him down. With a sneer, Daytona told Jin that it was of no use for Jin to be picking up the sword because no matter how hard Jin trained, he won't be able to improve because Jin had not talent. Jin grimaced in pain, both from his brother's harsh words and the weight of his foot. Daytona picked up a book that belonged to Jin. It was a book on basic swordsmanship theory. Daytona laughed upon seeing its contents and told Jin that no matter how many books he studied on swordsmanship or how hard he trained and worked, he would never be able to surpass the true masters. Top of form, bottom of form. Jin's heart sank as he listened. He tried to reach for his book, but Daytona was too quick. Daytona tossed the book aside and snatched Jin's wooden sword. Without a second thought, he snapped the sword in half, the pieces falling to the ground with a loud crack. Jin's eyes widened in shock and frustration. He reached out to stop Daytona, but his brother was already moving. Daytona picked up the torn book again and, with a sneer, began ripping it in half. Jin watched in despair as the pages were shredded and scattered around him. In that moment, Jin felt his dreams crumble along with the broken sword and the torn book. Haydena confronted Jin harshly, telling him that hope should not be wasted on someone as worthless as Jin. In response, Jin defended himself to his brothers, saying that even if they didn't like him, their actions had gone too far. This only fueled Haydena's anger. Grabbing Jin by the hair, Haydana snapped that they were only acting this way for Jin's own good, and he had no right to talk back. As Jin's brothers continued their mocking and bullying, Daytona stepped in with a cold reprimand and told Jin that since Jin was so keen on talking back, they were going to teach Jin a lesson in manners. The bullying intensified, leaving Jin to endure their relentless cruelty. Jin was well aware of his lack of talent and the disdain he faced from his family, but he remained undiscouraged. He told himself that with relentless hard work, he would one day earn their recognition and find his place within the Runcandel family. This conviction fueled his perseverance and hope. However, those hopes were shattered when, the very next day, Jin was summoned by the head of the family. To his utter shock and disbelief, he was informed that he was being banished from the Runcandel family. All his dreams crumbled in an instant. They told him that, despite his commendable efforts, they had decided against killing him. Instead, they had chosen to spare his life and expel him from the family. At the age of 25, Jin was cast out of the Runcandel family and began to wander aimlessly. It was during this difficult period that he encountered his master, who revealed that Jin's true talent lay not in swordsmanship but in the forbidden art of magic. This discovery marked the beginning of a new chapter in Jin's life. 3 years later, while engrossed in researching various magical spells at his home, Jin was abruptly engulfed by a swirling black flame. He found himself transported to a vast, empty abyss, disoriented and unsure of what to do next. In the midst of his confusion, a mysterious being appeared before him. The entity introduced itself as Soldaret, the master of all shadows. Soldaret proposed a contract with Jin, offering him the power to wield shadows and the ability to negate curses. Jin was stunned by the gravity of the offer and the implications it held for his future. In that moment, Soldaret peered deeply into Jin's heart and uncovered a troubling truth. He saw that, in Jin's youth, someone had harbored deep-seated hatred against him, leading to the imposition of a curse that had suppressed Jin's natural talent. Jin was stunned by this truth. Soldaret identified the curse as Bladed Illusion, a powerful enchantment that had suppressed Jin's innate swordsmanship abilities. It was a cruel and rare curse, one that had no place within the Runcandel family, renowned for its swordsmanship. The curse had inflicted significant suffering on Jin, playing a crucial role in the downfall in Jin's swordsmanship. Moved by Jin's tragic past, Soldaret felt a stronger connection to him. He assured Jin that from this moment forward, no curses would harm him again. All that remained for Jin was to embrace his newfound potential and strive to become an extraordinary magic swordsman. Soldaret's words lingered as the mysterious being vanished, leaving Jin with a newfound determination. Clutching his sword, Jin stepped outside his house, drew the blade, and pointed it skyward. It felt as though every time he wielded his sword, he reached new heights. The sword, once a burden, now seemed weightless in his hands, almost as if he were merely swinging his arms. Jin could feel the surge of new power within him. The blade moved with an effortless grace. From being the weakest member of the Runcandel family, Jin had transformed. With his enhanced strength and the ability to infuse his swordsmanship with magic, he was no longer the incompetent fool of the past. The once weak and ridiculed Jin had ceased to exist. He was ready to rise above his former self and prove his worth to the world. Jin's hard work had finally paid off, and he was eagerly testing his newfound power when, from a distance, armored men observed him intently. While he slept, Jin was abruptly awakened by an excruciating pain. He found himself lying on the ground, bleeding heavily and on the brink of death. Confused and disoriented, Jin could only remember a distant scream before being buried under a heap of debris. His body felt heavy and unresponsive, rendering him immobile. Desperately, he thought of his master, Soldaret, and wondered if there was anyone nearby who might offer help. Lying there, helpless and in disbelief, Jin grappled with the grim reality that he might die without ever fully utilizing the magic and power Soldaret had bestowed upon him. Overwhelmed by regret, Jin questioned the purpose of his newfound strength if it would end in such a tragic manner. He pondered why he had been granted power only to face such a premature end. The thought of dying without having fully embraced his potential and used his abilities filled him with profound sorrow and frustration. As Jin took his last breath, he suddenly found himself in an unfamiliar place. To his surprise, he could see tiny hands in front of him. Looking around, he saw members of the Runcandel family observing him. Confusion washed over him. Had he not died after all? At that moment, Gilly, a familiar member of the Runcandel family, approached him with a reassuring smile. "Don't be afraid," she said kindly. Jin was confused by her presence and the situation unfolding before him. As he scanned his surroundings, he noticed something striking. Among hundreds of swords scattered on the ground, one sword stood out prominently. It was the old sword named Barasada, the very sword Jin had picked during the selection ceremony. The realization struck him with a jolt. He was back in the past, at the very beginning of his journey, as a one-year-old baby. Jin understood now that he was reliving the selection ceremony and had a second chance to make the right choices. With the knowledge of his past failures and the power he had gained, Jin was determined not to repeat his mistakes. This was his opportunity to shape his destiny from the very start. Jin crawled toward the sword he had chosen in his previous life, Barasada, and placed his tiny hand on its hilt. The members of the Runcandel family gasped in shock and excitement, their eyes widening as they recognized the sword that belonged to the family head. Determination filled Jin as he gazed at the blade. This time, he vowed to forge his own path and avoid the mistakes of his past life. As the youngest member of the Runcandel family to select the revered sword, Barasada, Jin felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was resolved to make choices that would lead him to a different fate, embracing the opportunity to shape his destiny from the very beginning. As the selection ceremony concluded, Jin was relocated to the Storm Castle, the Runcandel family's grand estate. 6 years later, Jin found himself in the castle library, struggling to retrieve a book from a high shelf. Despite standing on a chair, his height made it difficult to reach the volume he wanted. It had been 6 years since his arrival, and with family rules dictating he remain there until he turned 10, he had 3 more years ahead. As he persevered, Jin finally managed to pull the book down and began to read. However, boredom soon set in. His concentration was abruptly shattered by a maid's terrified scream. Intrigued, Jin hurried to her side to check on the commotion. The maid, visibly shaken, reported that a dead bird had been discovered in Jin's room. As he examined the lifeless bird, Jin quickly deduced the culprits. He recognized the cruel handiwork of his 2 brothers, who had a history of tormenting him. At that moment, laughter echoed through the library. The maid turned to see Jin's 2 brothers, Daytona and Haydena Runcandel, standing nearby. Daytona, 9 years old and the 11th son of the 13 Runcandel brothers, and Haydena, also 9 and the 12th son, both wore mocking grins. Daytona smirked at Jin, telling Jin that it was a pity that the maid found the bird. Haydena echoed his sentiment, adding that they had put the bird there specially just for Jin. They added that it was a special gift for Jin. They laughed mockingly, asking if Jin was moved to tears by their so-called present. Jin remained silent, his expression unreadable. Memories from his previous life surged back, reminding him of the true nature of his brothers. Daytona and Haydena, who would later become infamous murderers in their roles as flag bearers, were showing their cruelty even now. Their act of killing an innocent bird to torment him was just a glimpse of the malevolence that would define their future actions. As Jin was lost in his memories, his 2 brothers interrupted his thoughts. They taunted him, telling him not to cry over their cruel prank because it annoyed them. Despite their relentless prodding, Jin remained silent, refusing to respond to their provocations. Haydena sneered at Jin, saying that just because Jin was destined to become the patriarch doesn't give him the right to ignore them. He demanded to know where Jin had stored the sword, Barasada. Jin's response was a barely audible mumble, too quiet to be heard clearly. At that moment, Haydena seized Jin by the shoulders and raised his fist, preparing to punch him for not answering properly and speaking too softly. But before Haydena could strike, Jin reacted swiftly, blocking the punch with a quick move. Haydena's eyes widened in shock at the unexpected defense. Jin turned to Haydena with a fierce glare and told him to shut up, his frustration evident. Without hesitation, he delivered a powerful right uppercut that struck Haydena squarely on the chin. Though Haydena staggered but managed to recover, his anger now turned towards Jin. As Haydena lunged to retaliate, Jin was ready. He expertly countered Haydena's attacks and landed a decisive right hook. Jin faced Haydena, his voice steady but filled with resolve. Jin told Haydena that he had endured with their bullying long enough, and now that his limit had been reached, Jin could not tolerate it any longer. With that, Jin unleashed a powerful, devastating blow to Haydena's stomach, sending him collapsing to the ground, unconscious. Daytona, rushing to his brother's aid, soon found himself in a similar state. He lay sprawled beside Haydena, rendered unconscious by Jin's swift counterattacks. Jin stood over them, his expression resolute, and he declared coldly that it was best for them to stay out of Jin's sight as much as possible. At that moment, a man named Khan, who was a guardian knight, approached Jin. Khan asked what was going on as he noticed the unconscious forms of Haydena and Daytona, their faces bruised and battered. Jin quickly masked his magic powers and turned to face Khan. Observing the scene, Khan's shock was evident. Jin seized the opportunity to explain to Khan that the two brothers were fighting among themselves and collapsed after knocking each other out. Khan recognized Jin's involvement but chose not to investigate further. Reflecting on the situation, he thought it was only to be expected of a Runcandel child to display such fierceness. Accepting Jin's explanation, Khan proceeded to carry the two unconscious brothers out of the library, intending to take them to the doctor. As Khan started to leave with the brothers to see the doctor, Jin stopped him and told Khan that they need to go somewhere else. Jin said firmly and told Khan to follow him. Jin headed out of the castle, and Khan, still carrying Haydena and Daytona, followed closely behind. The rain came down hard, pounding on the forest canopy in a steady beat. Jin instructed Khan to place the two brothers near the tree where he had just buried the bird they had killed. Khan asked Jin if they were really going to leave the two brothers there, his concern growing as the rainstorm threatened to worsen. But Jin wasn't about to let the two brothers off easily. He told Khan that they needed to face the consequences and understand the seriousness of their actions. Khan, recognizing Jin's higher authority, nodded in agreement and followed his orders without question. At that moment, Jin walked back to the castle without a glance at the two unconscious brothers. Khan, however, watched Jin intently, puzzled by the method Jin had used to subdue them. He sensed that it wasn't aura but something else entirely. After some thought, Khan concluded that Jin must have used magic to overpower the brothers. Khan realized that if magic was involved, this was more than just a simple scuffle between the brothers. He decided he needed to report the situation to the patriarch. Hastily, he summoned a servant to bring him a horse for the journey. Meanwhile, Jin, now inside the castle, watched Khan through the window. Jin understood that Khan would report the incident to the patriarch, knowing that despite being his guardian knight, Khan also had a role as an observer for the patriarch. Given that Jin's actions might have appeared as magic to Khan, and knowing that magic was banned in the Runcandel family, Jin was certain Khan would not ignore the matter and would report it to the patriarch. Jin possessed shadow energy, a power granted by his contract with his master, Soldaret. This power confirmed that even after regressing, his contract with Soldaret remained intact. Additionally, thanks to curse immunity, a benefit of being Soldaret's contractor, Jin could evade the bladed illusion. With a renewed sense of confidence, Jin told himself that the old, inept version of Jin Runcandel was gone. From now on, many things would be different from his past life. All that remained was for Jin to visit his father. Meanwhile, Khan had quietly reached out to the patriarch to report what had happened at the Storm Castle. He told him that Jin had defeated both Haydena and Daytona. The patriarch, concerned by this news, instructed Khan to gather the flag bearers immediately. He decided it was necessary to go see Jin in person. A short while later, a servant came to inform the patriarch that the 7 flag bearers of Runcandel and 200 knights had been assembled and were ready to go. The patriarch was pleased with this quick response and gave the order to set out. The 7 flag bearers, now in position, joined the patriarch as he led the group toward the Storm Castle. Their mission was to confront Jin and understand the situation firsthand. As they made their way through the stormy weather, the patriarch prepared himself for a serious discussion with Jin. As they were heading toward the Storm Castle, Mary Runcandel, the 7th member of the flag bearers, turned to one of her fellow members for clarification. She was uncertain about the situation and wanted to understand what was happening. She addressed Diffus Runcandel, the 4th member of the flag bearers. Mary told Diffus that she had been busy dealing with some mages when she was suddenly called to assemble with the flag bearers. Diffus considered the situation and replied that since the Tona twins, Haydena and Daytona, were not expected to leave the Storm Castle until next year, it was unlikely that the situation involved them. He speculated that the Patriarch had summoned them because he intended to meet with Jin, the youngest of the Runcandel family. Mary was puzzled as to why the Patriarch would make such an effort to meet Jin. Diffus reminded her that Jin had drawn the Founder's Sword during the selection ceremony, which might be the reason for the Patriarch's interest. However, Diffus remained uncertain if this was sufficient reason for the Patriarch to go out of his way. He acknowledged that it was difficult to understand their father's true intentions. At that moment, Mary and Diffus were interrupted by Luna Runcandel, the first member of the flag bearers. Luna advised them to keep their voices down and not speak too loudly. As Luna's warning sank in, Mary continued to ponder the reason behind their father's desire to see Jin. She couldn't help but question whether Jin was truly significant enough to deserve such a personal visit from the Patriarch. Back at the Storm Castle, Jin was being attended to by his maid. She informed him that Chiron, the Patriarch and his father, was coming to see them, and it seemed he might be specifically coming to meet his children. Jin responded thoughtfully, agreeing that the maid's speculation could be correct. He considered that his father might have come to the Storm Castle after hearing Khan's report about the incident involving Jin and the Tona twins, Haydena and Daytona. Jin knew that Khan, being somewhat dull, probably hadn't detailed that Jin was using magic. Instead, Khan likely reported what he had observed in a general sense. Jin wondered if the Patriarch's visit was due to the fact that he had seen Jin using a power that was neither aura nor magic. It was possible that Chiron wanted to investigate this new power and evaluate whether it could be a valuable asset for the family's future and prosperity. After some time, the castle gates creaked open, revealing the Patriarch, Chiron, standing there with an imposing aura. The guards snapped to attention, their respect evident as they watched Chiron walk with deliberate calm. Toward the Storm Castle, Chiron instructed the guards to bring the Tona twins to him for a private audience. Moments later, Daytona and Haydena stood before their father, heads bowed in respect as they greeted him. Chiron called out their names, and Daytona and Haydena responded. He informed them that he was aware of their altercation with Jin and asked them to clarify who was at fault and who had instigated the fight. Fearful but resolute, the Tona twins explained that they were not responsible for the fight. They insisted that Jin had initiated the confrontation and defeated them using a mysterious power, something other than their family's traditional aura, which they suspected might be magic. They pointed out that magic was strictly forbidden in their family's discipline, and if Jin had indeed used it, he must be interrogated swiftly before he could cover his tracks. At that moment, Chiron interrupted his sons, commanding them to stop speaking. He told Daytona and Haydena to etch his words into their hearts. If they continued to act in such a manner, they would not survive within the Runcandels. The Tona brothers looked at their father, panic evident in their eyes. Chiron then ordered the guards to remove his sons, stating that he had finished speaking with them. He immediately instructed them to bring Jin forward so he could speak with him. As the Tona brothers were led away, Jin prepared to face Chiron. Jin's father was not only the strongest but also the coldest person Jin had ever encountered. Chiron, Jin's father, held the esteemed title of Genesis Knight, the pinnacle of demigod power in the present era. Once an ordinary man, Chiron had lost most of his emotions after achieving this exalted status, becoming a figure entirely consumed by his obsession with the clan and its advancement. To Jin's father, anyone lacking talent in swordsmanship, like Jin, would be regarded as insignificant, just as Jin had been in his previous life. However, this time, things were different. In his new life, Jin was determined to command respect and ensure that no one would dismiss him. With renewed resolve, he made his way to the room where his father awaited. Upon opening the door, Jin found all the flag bearers turning their attention toward him. He approached, bowed deeply, and greeted his father. Chiron, noting Jin's formal address, asked why he had chosen to call him Patriarch instead of father. Jin explained that, given the presence of his brothers, sisters, the Guardian Knights, and over 100 clan members at the Storm Castle that day, he had assumed his father's visit was of an official nature. Consequently, Jin had opted to address him as the Patriarch out of respect. Luna, the first member of the flag bearers, was astonished by Jin's response. Jin's father was equally impressed and praised his son for his excellent answer. He then clarified that his visit to the Storm Castle was for a different reason and asked Jin to address him as father, rather than patriarch. Chiron proceeded to ask Jin the same questions he had posed to Jin's brothers. He inquired what wrongs his brothers had committed against Jin during the altercation. Jin answered with confidence, declaring that the conflict was driven by a desire for revenge. He spoke confidently, stating that anyone within the Runcandel family was obligated to repay whatever was given to them, whether it is a favor or a grievance. Mary, observing from the sidelines, laughed and expressed her satisfaction with Jin's answer. However, Chiron sighed upon hearing Jin's response. He then instructed everyone to leave the room except for Jin. As the others exited, they speculated among themselves whether Jin had successfully passed the test set by his father. At that moment, one of the flag bearers reminded everyone that they were to follow the patriarch's orders and leave the room immediately. Everyone quickly complied and exited, leaving only Jin and his father behind. Mary, watching from the doorway, was impressed as Jin prepared for a one-on-one conversation with their father. After everyone had left the room, Jin's father explained that he had sent them away to address a few issues directly related to Jin. He revealed that the Tona twins had reported Jin using a special power and possibly magic during their fight. Chiron reminded Jin that the Runcandels had strictly forbidden the use of magic, as it was believed that practicing magic would hinder their ability to reach the pinnacle of swordsmanship. He demanded to know what kind of power Jin had employed. Chiron warned Jin that if it was indeed magic, he would not let the matter go unaddressed. Jin knew he had to answer carefully, as his response could determine his fate. He understood that once his father learned about his power, it could not be ignored, especially given the unique nature of Solderet's abilities. Jin replied that he himself was uncertain about the nature of his power and could not distinguish whether it was magic or aura. He suggested that his father might assist him in naming it. To demonstrate, Jin activated his power. As the energy surged, Chiron was visibly shocked. It became clear to him that this was no ordinary power. It was reminiscent of the power possessed by the founder of the Runcandel family. Jin's father recognized that the power Jin possessed was the Barasata's shadow energy. He realized that if Jin had inherited the power of the founder, Solderet, Jin was destined to become the head of the family. Jin called out to his father, who responded, explaining that the power Jin wielded belonged to Solderet, the god of shadows. Jin was puzzled by the term, God of Shadows, so his father elaborated that Solderet had made a contract with Lord Tamar, the founder of the Runcandel family, and had been their guiding god ever since. However, Solderet had not appeared in the Runcandel clan since Lord Tamar's death. Jin's father admitted he did not know why Solderet had vanished, but now that the god's power had resurfaced through Jin, it seemed as though Solderet was attempting to reconnect with the Runcandel family through Jin. Hearing his father's explanation, Jin asked if his father was stronger than the god Solderet. Chiron thought for a moment before answering and responded to Jin by saying he does not have an answer to that as Jin's father. Chiron had never fought a god before. Jin smiled slightly at his father's response, appreciating the honesty. He thought to himself that this was indeed the most straightforward answer his father could have given. At that moment, Chiron's smile took on a sinister edge. He turned to Jin and said that Jin's question was an excellent one as due to Jin's innocent curiosity. It had given Jin's father, Chiron, a fascinating topic to consider. Chiron then acknowledged that it was indeed a wise decision for him to visit the Storm Castle and speak with Jin. He informed Jin that, in return, he would now ask him a question of his own. Chiron asked Jin how he intended to use the shadow energy he had inherited from Solderet. Jin, answering with confidence, claimed he would use the power for the benefit of his family. Chiron burst into loud laughter, recognizing that Jin's response was not the truth. He pointed out that Jin's claim was an amusing lie, noting that Jin had just beaten up his older brothers and thrown them into the storm. If Jin genuinely intended to use the power for his family, he wouldn't have acted so violently toward them. Chiron demanded that Jin provide an honest answer, no more lies. Realizing his previous response wouldn't suffice and knowing his father wouldn't let the matter drop easily, Jin decided to be truthful. With newfound resolve, Jin admitted that he wanted to use the power for himself. Chiron fixed Jin with a serious gaze and then remarked that he actually liked Jin's honest answer. Jin was taken aback by his father's unexpected approval. Chiron then turned and walked away, adding that he would be keeping a close watch on Jin from now on. After Chiron walked out of the room, Jin stood alone for a few moments, absorbing the gravity of the situation. Once his father was gone, Jin breathed a sigh of relief and felt a sense of satisfaction for having navigated the encounter with his father successfully. He reflected that securing the freedom to use the shadow energy as he wished was a significant achievement, but he hadn't anticipated his father's high expectations. This result was unexpected and marked a stark contrast from his previous life. Jin realized that his current life was shaping up to be vastly different from the one he had lived before. After the meeting, Mary joined Jin outside the castle, where the rain continued to fall. She handed him a package and instructed him to take it. Curious, Jin asked what it was, and Mary explained that it was a special gift from her. Mary then passed the heavy package to Jin's nanny, asking her to hold it carefully. She advised Jin to boil the contents thoroughly and chew them well. With a playful wink, she encouraged him to grow stronger quickly. After offering these instructions, Mary left Jin, who stood there, pondering the unexpected gift. Diffus asked Mary where the luggage she had been carrying was, and she replied that she had given it to Jin as a present. Confused by the unexpected gift, Jin retreated to his room with his maid to see what it contained. To his astonishment, Jin discovered that the gift contained a phoenix's heart. The sight left him speechless. He was stunned not only by the rarity and significance of the gift but also by the fact that it was for a 7-year-old. Jin couldn't help but think that Mary had been utterly reckless in giving him such a powerful and unusual present. Mary, a 6-star knight and the 7th rider of the Runcandel, was known as the Wind Fury, and had another, less-known title, the Madwoman of the Southern Region. Jin understood that her gift of the Phoenix Heart was more than a mere present, it was a challenge. Mary, with her intense passion for battle, was urging Jin to grow stronger quickly so he could eventually become her worthy opponent. The Phoenix Heart, when consumed at a young age, would not only grant resistance to fire but also serve as a powerful growth elixir. Jin realized that this rare gift was crucial for a 6-star mage to summon a phoenix safely. Reflecting on this, Jin thought that with this extraordinary gift, he might one day summon a phoenix himself in this lifetime. At that moment, Jin's maid, Gilly, arrived and asked if Jin had been waiting long. Jin assured her that he hadn't waited at all. Gilly then presented Jin with the food made from the Phoenix Heart, reminding him that it was a generous gift from Mary and urging him to eat before it got cold. Jin agreed and was about to start eating when he noticed his brothers, Daytona and Haydena, standing behind him, their eyes fixed on the food with barely concealed drool. Jin turned to them and asked if they had something to say. The brothers hesitated before admitting that they had come because they saw Gilly carrying a large pot and assumed there might be too much food for Jin to eat alone. They had hoped to sample some of the special dish themselves. Jin asked his brothers if they also wanted to share the food, and they quickly responded. With a resounding yes, Jin then informed them that in exchange, they would need to fulfill one of his requests. Eager for the food, they agreed without hesitation only to find themselves moments later digging in the damp earth of a dark cave. Confused, Daytona and Haydena questioned Jin about the purpose of their labor. The cave seemed empty, and they wondered why they were expending effort on what appeared to be a fruitless task. They worried about the possibility of someone discovering their digging and were unsure how to explain their actions if confronted. One of them speculated that if they were caught, Jin would be the one to face the consequences since he had ordered them to dig. Reluctantly, they continued their work, motivated by the promise of the soup. As they worked, they conversed quietly, acknowledging that despite being the youngest, Jin was quite intimidating. They were careful to obey him without question, fully aware of the consequences of defying him. The two brothers continued their digging, oblivious to the unfolding events below. Beneath them, cracks began to spread across the ceiling of a hidden chamber. In the center of the room stood a cylindrical tube filled with a mysterious liquid. Inside the tube, a man with long hair floated, submerged in the liquid. Though he was unconscious and deeply in slumber, his presence hinted at a mysterious and potentially important secret. Later, when the two brothers finally finished digging, they returned home, covered in dirt and mud from head to toe. Gilly, the maid, was taken aback by their filthy appearance. Jin greeted them with a smirk, noting that they had completed the task rather quickly. Dayton and Haydena, however, were far from pleased. Angrily, they told Jin to stop gloating and demanded that he serve them the soup, since they had fulfilled his request. Jin replied that he had already prepared the soup and set it out for them. Dayton and Haydena, eager to taste the reward for their hard work, hurried to the table. However, their excitement quickly turned to disappointment when they saw that only a small amount of soup remained, just a teaspoon each. Fuming, the brothers confronted Jin, claiming that the small portion was inadequate given the effort they had put in. Jin calmly explained that while he had promised them a taste of the soup, he had never specified the quantity. He reminded them that although the amount was minimal, he had still kept his promise. Left with no argument, Dayton and Haydena reluctantly accepted their tiny servings, their dissatisfaction evident as they prepared to enjoy the meager reward. Later that evening, despite the heavy rain, Jin ventured outside the storm castle. Determined to inspect the cave his brothers had dug, he braved the downpour. Expecting only a half-hearted effort, he was pleasantly surprised to find that they had actually done an excellent job. The cave was well excavated, exceeding Jin's expectations. Jin studied the wall and concluded that its thickness was just right for his one-star magic to break through. His frustration had been mounting as his magical energy had been building up without any opportunity to release it. Finally, he saw this as the perfect chance. He cast his spell, unleashing a powerful burst of energy. The powerful magic shattered the wall, revealing the secret room hidden behind it. Jin arrived at Runcandel's secret storage, a place he had never visited in his previous life. The experience felt oddly surreal. Recalling his older brother's instructions on accessing the room, Jin remembered that a specific trigger word was required. With a smile, he recited the phrase aloud, "Runcandel's child is here to console Moroccan." As Jin uttered the phrase, the spell activated with a resonant click. The door creaked open, granting him entry into the hidden storage. Runcandel's secret storage was a vast preservation where the family kept hidden tomes and artifacts from the ruins they had discovered over the past 1,000 years. Access to this room was strictly restricted to the flag-bearers of the Runcandel family only. Jin recalled a conversation from his previous life with his brother, who was one of the flag-bearers. His brother had once told him that Jin didn't need to know about the secret storage room because he lacked the qualifications to become a flag-bearer himself. Although Jin had felt disappointed by his brother's dismissal, he was also deeply grateful. Despite the rejection, his brother had been a significant source of support throughout his previous life. Using the knowledge from his previous life, Jin entered the secret storage room, eager to discover its contents. To his shock, he found a man submerged in a tube filled with liquid at the center of the room. This figure was surrounded by a dark, ominous aura, and his body was covered in scales, indicating he was not human. Jin was bewildered by the presence of such an unusual being in the secret storage. As he studied the figure, Jin recalled the incantation he had used to open the door and realized it held a clue to the identity of the man in the tube. The realization hit him. This was no ordinary man but the Black Dragon Moroccan. Jin had heard that Moroccan had been defeated by the first flag bearer and had then been cast into a deep slumber, but he had never imagined the tale to be true, until now. Jin stared at the man for a while, grappling with the revelation of the Black Dragon Moroccan. Shaking off his astonishment, he refocused on the reason he had come, to find the secret tomes hidden within the storage room. Determined, he turned his attention away from the enigmatic figure and began his search for the ancient texts. As he moved through the room, he was unaware that the man's hand had twitched slightly, a subtle yet significant movement. Unaware of the movement, Jin continued his search for the ancient texts, fully engrossed in his quest. Jin explored the secret room thoroughly and eventually found the tomes he had been searching for. The room was filled with ancient texts from various prestigious families. Among them, Jin's attention was drawn to a tome belonging to the Kungan family, known for their expertise in swordsmanship. Curious to uncover any insights that might enhance his own skills, Jin carefully examined the tome. Inside, he found complex theories on three-star magic, far beyond his current capabilities. Although he was tempted to take the tome with him, Jin knew that doing so posed a significant risk of being discovered. Instead, he devised a different plan. Each time he visited the secret storage, he would meticulously copy the contents of the tomes. This way, he could gradually accumulate valuable knowledge without endangering himself. After completing his tasks in the secret room, Jin returned to the Storm Castle to review the notes he had copied from the tomes. In the quiet of his room, Jin was deeply absorbed in his reading when his maid, Gilly, brought him some desserts. He accepted the treat gratefully but quickly resumed his studies, working through the notes until nightfall. Later that evening, Jin returned to the secret library to go over his notes once more. As he worked in the stillness of the library, he suddenly heard an unfamiliar noise outside his room. A wave of anxiety swept over him as he worried that someone from the Storm Castle might have discovered the secret library. Jin opened the door to investigate the noise and was startled to find a man standing there. To his shock, it was Moroccan, the dragon he had seen earlier in the secret room. Moroccan, who had been imprisoned in the tube, now stood before Jin with a menacing glare. "Who are you?" Moroccan demanded, his voice laced with authority and a hint of danger. Jin was taken aback. He had never anticipated encountering Moroccan awake, especially not in his current life. Despite his surprise, he quickly reminded himself to stay composed. He recalled that Moroccan was the family's guardian dragon and hoped that showing respect might help him avoid trouble. Jin looked at Moroccan and told him that he was Jin, the son of the Runcandel family. Jin bowed respectfully and told Moroccan that Jin greets the family's guardian. Moroccan's reaction was immediate and fierce. Enraged by the title of guardian, he roared in fury. Jin, startled by the dragon's wrath, felt a chill of fear. Moroccan's voice thundered through the room as he shouted that he was no mere guardian. His anger flared not only at Jin but at Runcandel, the founder of the family, as Runcandel had deceived generations, reducing Moroccan's true nature to that of a mere guardian. Moroccan was furious as he had been insulted by the founder of the Runcandel, and Moroccan was not going to tolerate such insults. That's all for today. If you do enjoy the video, please subscribe, like and share, and also share your thoughts in the comment section.